Scoop.
Scoop.
News from across Europe, live from the European
Neues aus
Parliament.
ganz Europa, live
Notizie
aus
da
dem
tutta
Europäischen
Europa,
Parlament.
in diretta dal
Nachrichten
Parlamento
aus ganz
europeo.
Europa.
Scoop, toutes les infos de l'Europe en direct du Parlement européen.
En directe des del Parlament Europeu.
Scoop.
Scoop.
Noticias
Noticias de toda Europa en directo desde el Parlamento
Novianosisjusos Europos, tiesiš Europos parlamento.
Nyheter från hela Europa direkt från Europaparlamentet.
Live from the European Parliament.
Scoop, toutes les infos de l'Europe en direct du Parlement européen.
You are listening to The Scoop, a journal on the issues that are affecting people across Europe today, produced in the studios of the European Parliament by young journalists from across the continent.
We'll be keeping track of a rapidly transforming Europe, looking at how decisions made here are changing how people work, where they move and how they get there.
This is Scoop, produced in the European Parliament in Brussels, and these are today's stories. We'll be looking at defence and migration issues, but first of all, an interesting figure on the European scene. Hello and welcome. This is Scoop News with Gina Davies and me, Christian Cummins.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel today hands over the EU Council's presidency to the Portuguese Prime Minister José Sócrates Carvalho Pinto de Sousa. Our reporter Francesco has more information. Francesco, is it mission accomplished?
Judging from the standing ovation Angela Merkel received at the end of her farewell speech from the European deputies on Wednesday, she seems to be not only an angel by name, but also an angel by deeds. The first and most important task of the German presidency was to get Europe back on track, putting an end to the constitutional crisis and the pause of reflection which was depicted by many critics rather as a pause than a reflection. Merkel proved indeed to be a successful leader by persuading her 26 colleagues to reach a satisfying compromise. The main substance of the proposed treaty has survived the wrangling over voting weights and fundamental rights. Even the intransigent position of the Polish government, claiming square root or death, was softened so that the EU finally got an efficient working basis of streamlined institutions. Despite Germany's success in hosting the festivities of the 50th anniversary of the Treaties of Rome, closing with the Berlin Declaration and getting the problem child constitution off the table, some objectives have not been achieved. The strategic partnership with Russia, for example, could not be further deepened, especially the matter of energy supply remains unsolved.
Ladies and gentlemen, all of these tasks certainly cannot be completed within 6 months. We have to move away from the short-term approach of 6-month presidencies. Europe needs continuity. That is why the team presidency is so important.
In order to make Europe more effective in achieving its goals, the German presidency has set up a common program together with Portugal and Slovenia, heading the Council during the next 2 semesters, shaping the first example of trio presidency. In the inaugural speech of her presidency, Angela Merkel said,
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't ever want to leave this house. I am convinced that there is no better place for us to live than in our shared European home.
Now it is Portuguese Prime Minister Sócrates' duty to keep this home as comfortable as possible.
We've been hearing about Angela Merkel, who has been at the helm of Germany for less than 2 years, but already appears to be one of the more experienced leaders on the European scene. But there are new faces at the head of both Britain and France, and their governments will have a big influence on the next few years of European politics. It seems that the new Prime Minister of Britain, Gordon Brown, has youth on his mind as he appoints the youngest British cabinet ever, including 41-year-old Jackie Smith, the first woman to become Home Secretary. Also included in the shake-up which kicked out most of Blair's former team was the controversial Education Secretary Ruth Kelly, who has now been switched to Transport. The mood in the UK is encouraging towards Brown after Tony Blair's departure, but it is to be seen whether he will remain as popular as the recently elected French President Nicolas Sarkozy. Relationships between the two leaders have already become tense after Brown dramatically intervened in a crucial summit over competition in the European market. But the two have since spoken over the phone, with Mr Sarkozy congratulating Mr Brown on his appointment.
We've seen that the UK has shown itself very willing to commit troops abroad, but let's move on to other European countries who have quite a different approach because of their traditional military neutrality. Astrid Reinprucht and Oscar Sandberg report.
EU soldiers are being deployed in Kosovo, Congo and Macedonia. They might get into direct combat there and be killed. This is one consequence of the European Union's security strategy that was announced in 2003. There, the EU called for active military involvement of EU state members. This also means that states have to hand over some of their decision-making powers to the EU. But how can this policy be reconciled with the neutral stance that Austria, Ireland and Sweden still have? What place does neutrality have in Europe today? Let's ask EU Parliament member Hannes Swoboda from Austria, where neutrality still forms part of the national constitution. I believe, of course, that neutrality is different from what it was 10 or 20 years ago. But it has to be assured that we can decide autonomously whether to take part in operations or not. We have already done this before. We have taken part in operations in the Balkans. We've been very active there in peacemaking and peacekeeping operations. A short question. What does the European security and defence policy imply with regard to the neutral Austrian identity? The neutrality of Austria is being adapted and changed by the European security and defence policy. Neutrality is an option today, but it's not the regular case anymore. The regular case is to take part in EU operations.
In March, the EU President, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, expressed her desire for a unified EU army. With the establishment of the so-called EU battle groups, a big step towards this scenario has been accomplished. The battle groups are rapid military response forces that can be deployed 5 to 10 days on the ground anywhere in the world. In January 2008, neutral Sweden will be responsible for one of these EU battle groups. What does this imply? The Swedish General Major Bengt Andersson, who is the commander of the battle group, says Sweden has not been involved in such operations before. Not in modern times. We participated in the Congo operation in the 60s. That was very difficult. After that, it went on with a couple of other easier UN missions. Kosovo and Afghanistan has been more complicated, but still, it has never been neither the same high level of alert nor the same dimension or tasks as in the battle group. Nordic Battle Group consists not only of Sweden, but of 4 other countries. I asked General Major Bengt Andersson if you can talk about a military integration in Europe. At the level we already are integrated. We have a force headquarters in Sweden with personnel from all participating countries who works there every day. But otherwise, I don't think it's right to talk about a military integration. Can Sweden be engaged in missions like the battle group and stay neutral? It's a strict political question, but from my military point of view, the question of neutrality and the battle groups are not connected. Multilateral cooperation like this has never been stopped by neutrality.
As Poland and the Ukraine are preparing to organise Euro 2012, Poland faces a problem of who will build the road network and stadiums. Since Poland joined the EU in 2004, an estimated 2 million people have left the country in search of better wages. While Western Europe is teeming with Polish workers, back home in Poland, the media are warning that they don't have anyone left to build the new stadiums. In Dansk, one of the host cities, the Baltic Arena Stadium will be built from scratch. Our correspondent Joanna Hoza has spoken to Mikael Brandt from Dansk City Council, who is optimistic about the labour problem.
It would be a problem if it wasn't such a huge investment, which paradoxically will only help to organize people to work. Only huge experienced companies can take part in the competition. Companies which have enough equipment and human resources. So the winners of the bidding will guarantee success. These companies will have enough funds to offer high salaries and find skilled workers.